Hello, everyone. Welcome to Arash's World. Today we have a very special guest. We have Letao Wang. How are you doing?
Hi, good morning, Rasha. I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. And my first question is the toughest one. How would you briefly describe yourself? I was going through your stuff. There's a lot of things you can talk about, but how would you briefly introduce yourself to our audience here?
Right. I am an astrologist and also a spiritual counselor. And I do personal counseling through using the method of, a lot of different types of metaphysical studies. For example, Western astrology, Chinese astrology, as well as tarot and oracle, and also numerology. So it's a little bit like a combination of different studies that I have done, and the purpose was to achieve the sense of therapy or healing with a client in a session.
This is absolutely wonderful. And you're building bridges like East and West together. I just love that of like combining those traditions. Now, do you find it a bit difficult sometimes? Do you have to make compromises with that? Or do you think it flows nicely, those different views and approaches? How do you deal
Mm.
with some of the differences maybe between the two?
It's kind of interesting because I literally had a YouTube collaboration, right, with a Chinese metaphysician just several weeks ago,
Mhm.
and we talked about, because he was talking about Chinese astrology and I was talking about, Western astrology, and so we were exchanging our opinions. And what we realized was that at the end of the day, they all come together into the same conclusion. And it's almost like, thousands of years ago, our ancestors, right? And they found some type of cosmic regularities in the sky. And they kind of like studied the movement of the stars, right? And something that is behind the tangible. And we kind of like, summarized, right, those things that we observed, onto a piece of paper and or, into a book. And even though we were using different systems, but our observations are the same, essentially. And at the end of the day, no matter what method you're using, you're reaching the same direction, which is actually about the ultimate, I think, the ultimate theory, right, in the universe, which is called the oneness, or the called as above, so below. And so I rarely find the contradictions there, but more often than not, I find the similarities, or, it's almost like aha moment for me. Ah, that makes sense. Things like that.
I absolutely love that. And it kind of makes me think of quantum physics, where you have the wave and the light, and it's kind of
Oh,
it's a
100%.
particle and a wave, and it's both. And you
Yeah.
have the sun and the moon, right? So it's
Yeah.
just what are you focusing on? And they are both part of the same universe.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. And also, in the Western world, of course, most of these days, most of people are using the solar calendar. But for example, in the Islamic world, they use a lunar calendar more. And in Chinese astrology, we also use both. We use both solar and lunar. And it's very interesting because, every year the biggest thing for Chinese people is to celebrate Chinese New Year. Now that's going to be very soon in about 2 weeks' time, right? And that's based on lunar calendar. But when we really talk about, the Chinese animal signs, right? And people say you're a rooster, right? You are a dragon, right? You were born the year of horse, things like that. That was actually based on a solar calendar instead of lunar. So we actually use both to look at timing and people's lives, and you find those the rules or the so-called regularities out there. Yeah. Mm.
Mhm. And that's a perfect segue because I wanted to ask you about the year of the snake. So that's coming up on the
Mm,
29th, if I'm correct. So
correct. Yeah. So that's
about
also,
there. Mhm.
yeah. So it's also kind of like interesting, right? Because Chinese New Year, like what I said, is based on lunar calendar, but the
Mhm.
Chinese zodiac signs is based on solar calendar. So actually, the starting date, January the 29th this year, which is the day where when we celebrate Chinese New Year, is actually not the first day of the new zodiac sign. The year of the new zodiac sign actually starts on February the 3rd or 4th every year,
Mhm.
which is the official day of spring. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
what is awaiting us as a rule or overall? I mean, the snake, I always think of, I actually have a positive impression of the snake, of, shedding your
Mm,
skin,
yeah, yeah.
transformation, changing, becoming like somebody else, and so on. And in
Correct. Yeah.
medicine, the snake is also something important for healing. But then you also have
Mm,
in Christianity where the snake is, seen as as an evil force. So what's
mm.
awaiting us in this year of the snake? What are some of the things that we can look forward to and maybe be
Oh.
careful about?
It's fascinating that you mentioned, the healing, right, effects of the snake, and you also mentioned in Christianity, maybe the snake is seen as an evil existence,
Mhm.
but actually they're also kind of like similar because if you read the Old Testament, right, about the garden, um, where of Eden, right, where Adam and Eve lived together, it was a snake who whispered at Eve's ear and telling her to eat the apple. Well, you can see that as evil, but also you can imagine how come a snake, such an ugly creature, would know such big secret
Yes.
that human being wouldn't know, right? Because snakes, they're wise. They have knowledge. They know everything. And it depends on how we use that knowledge and that wisdom, right? And for that snake, he whispered or she whispered at Eve's ear and disclosed that that secret which is not supposed to be disclosed. But the fact the fact that it was a snake whispering that knowledge at Eve's ear so that she knew she learned shame, she learned I have to cover myself and all that was because of this profound nature of snake because they represent wisdom, they represent knowledge. And so when we compare the year of snake and also with the previous year, which is a year of dragon, you will feel this huge difference in terms of energy because dragon was all it's more about the yang energy and the snake is more about the yin energy. The
Interesting.
dragon was all about authority, power, right? Ambition, all right, rising above, because dragon is just powerful and sometimes to the point that it can be actually destructive with a dragon power. But snake is more yin, it's more receptive, it's more about going inward with ourselves, right? With our reflections, exactly like what you mentioned earlier, shedding the old skin, what do we need to release and let go of? And I think especially this year of snake is carries its own element. This is a year of wood, right? So we have the
Mhm.
wood snake this year. And wood is also kind of like more toward the yin energy because wood is like a tree. It's static, right? It's not like running and moving. It's something that's very deeply rooted in the earth and slowly growing. And so this wood snake also, it's not just about shedding the old skins, but it's also about finding your roots and find your foundation. And because for a tree to grow, right, the wood basically means a tree. And in order for a tree to prosper, right, in the future, you need to deeply root it down there so that you can grab all the nutrition, you are stable. And then the branches on top can expand and can grow leaves, right? So I think this year requires a lot of us to go back to the basics
Yeah.
and to find our roots. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
I love that.
the general energy there.
And so, are there any signs that would thrive specifically? And I'm kind of like also interested in rabbit for no particular reason, like I'm a rabbit.
Mm.
But also a friend of mine was asking about a snake. So does a snake usually the same sign do well in their own year, or is that a negative thing? And then my other question would be about myself too. How is rabbit going to do in
Ah, I
this
see, I
upcoming
see.
year? So two
Uh,
questions here.
So one thing about Rabbit is actually 2024, the year of dragon, was not necessarily a very powerful year for Rabbit.
No way.
Because last year Rabbit didn't have any auspicious stars protecting the Rabbit people. Well, there was one, but that didn't really, unless you are taking your time to rest, because the only star that was helping Rabbit last year was called the rest god in Chinese astrology. And the rest god is more for relaxation, sleeping, rest, taking good care of your health. taking time off work, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Oh,
So for people who are really, for example, the rapid people, maybe they're thinking about, last year, I want promotion, I want starting new business, I want, achievement, I want big sales, right? I want to open new branches of my business. It could have been a more challenging year for rabbit. However, moving to the year of snake, it's actually much better. Um, this year, you do have the rabbit people do have a very good star. It's called the prosperous fortune, and this star has a lot to do with success, specifically when it comes to business or financial related matters. So I would say this year is a little bit like a wake up year for rabbit people from the dragon's year's slump, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
that's very
So that's actually good. Now, the other thing about I think the other sign that you asked about was a snake. Yeah.
Mhm.
And this is a very interesting thing. And a lot of people ask me in podcasts. And so I would love to debunk this myth. Yeah. Some
Okay.
people say when it's your own year, it's bad. Some people say, oh, it's good, it's your own
I've
year.
heard both. Yes.
Mm. So here's the thing, right? Uh, I'm sure, Arash, you have been to a traditional Chinese restaurant, right?
Yes.
Can you describe what it looks like, the table, what does the table look like in the Chinese restaurant?
Well, I think like the traditional one looks like a train station. It doesn't look like I haven't been to fancy ones, right? So, but
Oh,
it
huh,
looks
huh.
like kind of like more common, and they're big tables, and usually like a lot
Yeah,
of people sit around it. Sometimes the
yeah.
tables actually move, so you can share the
Correct.
with
Yeah,
everyone.
yeah.
So that's been my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So see, my impression is, for example, when you talk about a Western restaurant where people gathering are eating, right? I think of the Last Supper, that photo. It's a long table,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Rectangular
Yes.
table, right?
Okay.
But it doesn't happen in Chinese culture. In Chinese culture, always it's a round table. Okay, it's a
Ah,
round table and people are sitting around that table and you can twist the plate. You know
yes,
what I
yes,
mean, right?
I
That's a
do.
very Chinese thing, right? So you can imagine, yeah, and every year it's almost like the 12 Chinese zodiac animals will sit together around that table and they're having dinner together and they're discussing, okay, what's for the next new year? Now, one is your own year, let's say for the snake year, and if you're a snake, not only are you attending the dinner, but also you are the organizer of the dinner.
Ooh, okay.
So you have to be the one calling everyone, organizing the schedule, calling the restaurant, asking for, the menu and telling them who has, allergy, we can't eat this, we can't eat that, right? All the transportation, sending everyone email. And so what does that mean? It means that it's not just you going there to have fun, but you have responsibilities and everyone is depending on you. If someone has a question, they will call you. Oh, what time is the dinner? How do I get there? Do you have a map? Right? I heard you are the one organizing everything. And so one is your own year. The reason why people say it's bad is because as human being, I think we all are a little bit like want to run away from responsibilities, right? If I don't have to organize everything, if I can just show up and eat and laugh and have a great time and leave, then I would love to do that. I don't
Yes.
want to be the one organizing everything because if something goes wrong, I have to be responsible for it.
Mhm.
Right? Let's say if the restaurant has got something wrong and the food has got something that is not supposed to be in it, people go to the hospital, then I have to be responsible because I didn't do my job well. And so that's why a lot of people don't like their year because they feel they're pressured.
Mhm.
And usually when it's your own year, there is a sense of pressure. And in Chinese astrology, we also call that the year of the Grand Duke. The Grand Duke is basically a god. And so you can imagine when you're having dinner, the Grand Duke is sitting right behind you, watching you eating. So you also have to sit properly. You have to make sure that I'm doing the right thing because someone's watching. And so when it's
Oh,
your own year, it's
mhm,
about pressure. It's about hard work. It's about details. It's about responsibility.
mhm.
But if you can actually really do well, and if you can take the responsibility and you just put the pedal to the metal and go through it, you will be rewarded as well.
I love the butt. Right. That's awesome. Right.
Mm.
I was thinking like, is that similar to Jupiter and Saturn when you talk about like, somebody watching you like Saturn and the Western
Very much so.
astrology or
Yeah, yeah. I
Jupiter
mean, it's a little bit like
prosperity?
Saturn.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Saturn is a bit like that, right? Saturn is about, understanding the responsibilities you
Yeah,
have because Saturn was the ancient god of agriculture. And so agriculture was about, hard working and you have to be consistent and you have to
yeah,
be clear, right?
yeah.
Putting in the hard work. And then when it comes to the right timing, which is autumn, you get rewarded, you get the harvest. So it's a little bit similar to that.
Mhm. Okay.
But this year, actually, snake people, the good news that they also have got a lot of auspicious stars protecting them. One of the stars that is very good for snake people this year is called the Heavenly Relief. And this star is very good for problem solving.
Oh,
And
okay.
for example, if you have, facing challenges, right? You need to resolve issues. Usually this year, you will find the right resource to help you resolve those issues and challenges in front of you. So this is a help from the heaven for the snake people this year.
I was also wondering about the color red. I noticed that we're both wearing red, and mine
Yeah,
was conscious too. So
yeah.
that brings good luck. Is that true? And also red underwear. Does that also help?
That actually is more sort of like a superstitious thing. Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, people usually do it around Chinese New Year. If it's your own year, people wear red. I mean,
Mhm,
at the end of the day, because red is just a very auspicious color in Chinese
mhm,
culture anyway.
mhm,
That's why all the lanterns are a red color. People like to wear reddish, stuff, in winter, specifically in Chinese culture. But actually, each animal would have their own lucky color anyway.
okay.
Yeah, so for example, for the rat people this year, the lucky color is actually platinum.
Mhm.
Kind
Does
of
that
like
change
platinum.
per year? So
Yeah,
everyone has their,
correct.
oh, interesting. I did
Correct.
not
Yeah,
know
every
that.
year the lucky color will change. Yeah.
Mhm,
But I think, when it comes to color, right? I'm more flexible on this. I think that at the end of the day, you have to be comfortable in that color yourself. Because, when we look at someone's life, we can actually tell the client what color is actually good for them in general, based on the date and the time they were born. Because there are five elements
mhm,
in our 八字, okay, which is the four pillars
mhm,
of our lives in Chinese I Ching.
mhm,
When we analyze someone's life, and if certain elements are lacking, then you need to add more elements into this person's life to make them balanced, and that element usually carries colors. Uh,
mhm,
so for example, if a person lacks fire in their life, then you need to add red color into it because red color is associated with fire. But if someone's energy lacks water, then they need to add blue or black because those two colors are associated with water energy. So it's not just about the year, but deep down it also has to be about what you need,
mhm.
based on the time and the day you were born. Huh?
Okay, fascinating. Now, I want to talk
Yeah.
about your two beautiful oracles that you have. There's the Oracle of the Mythic Heroes
Mm,
and the Oracle of
mm.
the Celestial Deities, and they're wonderful, beautiful to look at, but there's also much more to it. So, can you give us maybe a brief description of each of them and what it's
Mm.
used for, what you use it for, and what we can learn
Yeah,
from it,
yeah.
and so on?
Right. So, well, I think, even before we talked about the decks, I think people might be, wondering, are they like Chinese themed, things? Actually, they're not.
No,
So
they're not.
my
Yeah.
early,
Huh.
yeah, so my early days training actually as an astrologist was actually I was under a mythologist, and so my early days learning about astrology and tarot was very much about based on uh, storytelling and ancient Greek and Roman myth, and sometimes Egyptian myth. And so, for example, this deck, Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, this one was based on ancient Roman and Greek mythology, and it contains 40 mythical stories from the myth, right? And each card would be talking about a story and a very famous hero or heroine in the myth. And there's
But
also
I
a
find
lesson.
interesting
Mm,
too. You're not looking at the gods. You're looking at the heroes and heroines. So people that we
mm,
can aspire towards, right? That's within a
correct. Yeah.
certain reach for us. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are already a lot of cards out there, right? Talking about the gods and goddesses, right? But exactly. So when I was creating this deck, and I was thinking, but I am actually more fascinated by the humans, the mortals actually in those stories because they are more relatable. They are not invincible. They also go through their ups and downs, and they go through the similar emotions that we go through on a daily basis, even though they lived thousands of years ago. If you believe they actually existed, right? People say there's always some truth in the myth.
Mhm.
So, and actually, this is one of the things I wrote in the guidebook. I said, well, myth was never true, but they will always be. So it's a little bit like the kind of life lesson that we can resonate with the ancient and mythical heroes. And this deck was published last year, 2024, in January by Beyond Words Publishing, and it has been distributed by Simon Schuster in bookstores, Amazon, and everywhere. So in case our audience, if you like Roman Greek mythology, and also this could be actually a great gift for teenagers. So if you have children or if you want to give someone, because the guidebook contains a 80 like a huge amount of storytelling there. Yeah. So actually some of my clients use this to read the stories for their children. So
It's
this is
also
something.
educational, which is fascinating, right? Yeah, you're
Yeah,
learning
yeah,
things as you go through them. Yes. What about
correct.
the
Yeah.
celestial deities?
So
What's
this is the Celestial Deities, right? The artwork's a little bit different. It's You can see it's very kind of like anime feeling. Yeah, I
Mhm,
really enjoyed working with this artist, and he's very talented. And this deck is more astrology based. So we're talking about the planets, right? The sun, the moon, the Mercury, Venus, Mars, right? All those planets and the archetypes and those astrology entities represent. And so
mhm,
this deck is also very beautiful. So I would recommend this deck to all the astrology lovers. And
oh,
also you can see the artwork. I'm sure, well, if it's a podcast, right, people can see. But if you are watching this from a YouTube channel, you can see some of the artwork is actually quite beautiful.
mhm,
This is a cubit,
yeah,
arrows, right? Mercury, and just show a few cards, right? For
right.
audience, Athena, one of my favorite.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, and finally, let's show, oh, the moon, the cover actually. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, they're
yeah, this is
works of
really.
art. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is also something that is very amazing. The cards is actually quite big. You can see my hand. Yeah.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
they're almost like a piece of art, to be
mhm.
honest. Specifically, if you like Oracle cards and you want to use something that is beautiful and also something that is very gentle, I would recommend this deck to you. Yeah. This one was published in June 2024. Yeah.
One set of cards that I'm familiar with, and since I was 16, are
Mm,
tarot cards. And
mm,
I find them fascinating, and especially for when you talk about like using and counseling. You have also a counseling degree.
mm, mm.
That's fascinating, but also using tarot cards to come towards to reach the higher self, to come to an
Yeah.
understanding of a situation. But also, I see it as a therapist, like the tarot cards themselves as a wise therapist who actually can predict the future. So it can
Mm,
be used in so many ways, and combined
mm,
with
mm.
that, you can deal with various issues, problems, concerns that we have on a daily basis. So, what's been
Correct.
your
Yeah.
experience of that? And yeah, what would you like
Mm.
to share with us here about tarot cards specifically?
So, my journey with tarot card is actually very different from most,
Hmm,
let's say, masters, right?
hmm,
Because a lot of people would say, oh, when I was maybe also in your case similar, people would say, oh, when I was 16, I got my first deck and I fell in love, and that's just how this started. I was very different. I got my first deck also when I was, in my late teens, but I hated it actually.
oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I did not get it at all.
Uh,
I was looking at the artwork and I was looking at the book, the meanings, and I just didn't get it. And I was thinking, you know what, this is not really for me. So I put it away. And my first deck of tarot was actually sleeping in the drawer for many, many years. Um, so what happened was that, as I mentioned earlier, and then I encountered my first astrology teacher who was a mythologist. And so what really opened the door for me into this world was to study mythology and the storytelling. And even, for example, when I was studying astrology, my teacher would never ask me to really memorize the definitions of, for example, what does Saturn represent? What does Venus represent? He would say, okay, we're seeing someone's chart and we're looking at this person has Venus and Mars in conjunction. Venus is Aphrodite in Greek, and Mars is Aries, right, in Greek language. So what do you think that means when Aphrodite and Aries get together in the story? And what do you think that means in someone's chart when they have these two people getting together? And so my astrology understanding in the early days was all about stories, was all about what the story says and what could it mean actually on someone's chart. And when I actually was already pretty versed in mythology, then I went back to tarot again. I pulled out that deck of tarot, and then suddenly a lot of things made sense because I was able to actually see stories in those images. And that's finally how tarot became meaningful to me, actually. And I understand that this is very different from a lot of other people because I think a lot of people would more focus on maybe the symbolism, right? For example, let's say the card, the Fool. The Fool is holding a white rose, right? And we have a dog barking at the Fool, the guy. Okay, so what does that mean, right? For me, but what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a whole story there rather than just that image. And without that story, I used to find it very difficult for me to memorize the 78 cards. But with those mythological training, it became very easy for me. And that's when I really started to build a relationship with tarot. And also to mention the counseling part that you mentioned, that you asked about, it was the same. When I read cards for my clients and counsel them, a lot of the times we're talking about the stories. And then I want the client to be a part of that story. And I want my clients to feel they are actually in the same journey with maybe Theseus and in the labyrinth, or maybe they are on the boat with Menelaus attacking Troy in order to save Helen of Troy. And so sometimes their life story, they can really apply their experiences to those stories and then bring this back to their life. And they will understand what's the lesson there. So that's actually the style that I do counseling. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, what a wonderful way. And I know when I do tarot card readings, sometimes the people don't want to tell me their question. And then at some point, like
Mm,
halfway through, it's like I know exactly what the question was based on the cards that are coming, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there's that. My experience was actually, and I grew up in Germany, and when I was
Uh,
16, my French teacher actually
uh,
did a reading for me. And the
uh,
first card was actually the death card, but he said, "Oh, don't
uh,
worry, it's nothing bad. You're
uh,
not going to die, right? Soon, at least."
mm,
And but then there's a guidebook that came with
mm,
that set.
mm,
So that guidebook really helped me of letting me know what each card
yeah,
means and where they are.
yeah.
And then afterwards, you just become more familiar. And I noticed that
Mm,
there's a similarity between playing cards. And
mm,
so between that, the I Ching is also related to
mm,
that and so on.
correct.
So I
Yeah.
ended up finding actually playing cards in the street, and I know what the equivalent is in tarot cards. So they give me a
Mm,
message of like what's gonna happen, what's important in the next time. So I have like a reading every once in a while where I find cards in the street. And because they're playing
mm,
cards, I know that what they stand for because they're
yeah, yeah,
connected to
yeah,
the tarot cards. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's kind of fascinating in that sense, but there's so much there that we can really dive into. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, I'm just gonna say that we can actually use a lot of different things, right? I mean, ancient
Mhm.
Chinese people used to read turtle shells.
Yes. Yes.
Also, I've seen a girl on YouTube. She was using charms. So she has a bowl of charms and she would just
Mhm.
grab some random charms and throw it on the table and she would read that. And
Mhm.
also, there's coffee cup reading,
Yes,
tea leaf
Turkish coffee,
reading,
yeah,
right?
as
All these
well.
kind of things.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, those objects, or whether it's paper-based cards or they are, I don't know, charms, right? Or maybe dices, right? Things like that. At the end of the day, we're just using an objective channel, right? To access our intuition. And whatever that works, I think that's totally fine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so
Mm.
again, talking about the bridges, and you are combining here ancient wisdom with modern practices. And again, that's commendable. But also, how can the mental health field, for example, grow from this and dive into that?
Mm.
Because I think often it's just really like one view, and we need to like expand that and open up. So, what would be your suggestion for how we can move forward in terms of, again, mental health? The mental health field and how we can
Yeah.
help others more dealing with things like common things like depression and anxiety and so
Absolutely,
on.
yeah. I think this has two different layers, right? I mean, one layer is that I think at the higher level, I think, for example, the entire mental health industry, for
Mhm,
example, actually psychologists,
mhm,
right? And those so-called people in the academic field, they need to actually be open-minded enough to welcome spirituality. I personally have experienced this twice actually, which was a little bit kind of like a realization for me. The first time was I was actually trying to open an astrology a course actually at a local university in Hong Kong. And I proposed this to the director and I said, this can be a selective class, right? In the psychology department, we're not promoting, superstition, but, a lot of the famous psychologists in the old days, they were astrologists and they
mhm,
studied
mhm.
the
Yeah,
cosmic regularities and the rules. And I said one of the famous examples is Carl Jung. He
got
was
you.
a very unwavering believer in astrology. And also, we're talking about also dream interpretation, things like that, right? And so but that didn't really go through because one thing I think the academic world is worried about is the so-called reputation because they
Yeah,
feel
yeah,
maybe the world is not ready for that. See,
yeah.
they don't want to open the course and then the families of the kids complain.
Yeah,
Oh,
even
I
yeah,
mm,
even William James, the founder of in psychology, was connected to again mediumship and
yeah,
psychics and so on. So
yeah,
that was there, but then it moved away towards science, I think, and that is
yeah,
a very limiting way of seeing the
mm,
human psyche. And the word
yeah,
psyche too is like it's spirit. It's like
yeah,
that needs to
correct.
be
Yeah,
there, but we
correct.
have
Yeah,
separated that in
yeah.
certain ways.
So this is actually, I think, what the higher level needs to do, right? The government or the universities or the system, right? But also we can also look at our level. For example, why do we think that they cannot be open-minded? It's because it is not a controlled industry. It is because everyone can come out and claim that I'm a psychic and I can read people because there's no, for example, no accreditation, no certification,
Yeah,
no exams, nothing
yeah,
to measure whether you are real or fake. And the reason why people tend to have a negative impression of these kind of things to mix this with academic things, right? Research and psychology is because there are a lot of fake ones out there.
yes.
And
No,
because people have been
yeah.
scammed, right? I mean, personally, I have actually been scammed because usually when I travel overseas, I like to see how other readers work. It just, one of the things I like to do. And I have seen some amazing readers. And actually, one of the best readers I've seen that I was like, wow, this person is like she knows how to read, right? She's a real deal. It's a lady in Sydney that I met. But I've also seen really fake ones. I know that they don't know how to read cards, but they are charging people a lot of money, and they're just like, yeah, 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 right? Because I know how to read cards. I know they're fake. And so and I was thinking, well, this is a reason because of you guys exist. That's why people get scammed, and that's why people cannot be open-minded enough. So I think at our level, we also need to, from our at least from our perspective, we need to provide a professional service.
Mhm.
We can't control what other people do, but we know that when we are, for example, providing a professional service and charging people money on what we are doing, and what we can be responsible for, because we are not just doing things for ourselves, but we're also building a reputation for this industry. And hopefully, maybe not in our generation, but somehow maybe after 30, 40, 50, 100 years, this will become a part of the, you know, a more mainstream. Let's put it this
Yeah.
way.
And
Yeah.
but it is
And yeah.
moving in the right direction. I feel like certain
Mm,
things are, and again, spirituality has become more common. People talk about it more, and so I think it's like a, kind of an opening up. Like there's a
yeah.
gateway that we
Yeah.
can, of course, take advantage of. Two of the
Yeah.
things that I'm fascinated with is synchronicity, and you mentioned Jung as well as serendipity. So
Mm,
what is your view on that? Because I strongly believe in that. Synchronicity,
mm.
serendipity. What would you say? about those things?
Well, it's coming back to this, I think this concept about the oneness
Yeah.
that we study in astrology, because we're basically seeing the whole universe as one.
Mhm.
And so as above, so below, as within, so without. And so when we talk about the synchronicity and things like that, it's not that, for example, when people say, oh, it's Mercury retrograde, and that's why, I'm late. Oh, it's Mercury retrograde. That's why,
Mhm.
I have an accident. I sent the wrong email. It's not because of that. I don't think the sky trigger us. I don't think we control the sky either. It's about synchronicity. It's about they just are mirrors with each other. They reflect each other's action. So what the reason why we're having, for example, we're late today is not because Mercury is retrograde. They don't trigger this us being late,
Mhm.
but it's just a reflection of things that are happening parallel in the universe, and they always reflect each other. And this is how we can use astrology to look at what is happening down here. So this is
Well,
how I see this.
one of the things I struggle with the difference between free will and destiny and fate. So
Mm,
it
mm,
seems like both are valid, kind of like when we talk about the particle and the wave, but then
yeah.
both are part of it too. So I find that a bit I struggle with that still. Like what
Mm,
part,
mm.
how can we maybe what is your impression of that in terms of like our free will versus something that's fated, that's fate, destiny?
So if I can use an analogy
Please do.
to describe this, it's a little bit like we are all a seed,
Mm.
okay? And the seed has its own quality. Okay, if you're a farmer, if you ever grown anything, when you look at the seed, whether this is a very strong seed that will just sprout like that, or this is a little bit like maybe the seed looks a little bit sick, right? It's not that powerful. So the seed is actually what we are given. It's a sense of fate. But how you grow that, how you nurture that, that's your free will. Sometimes it's true that for a good seed, you don't need to do anything. You throw in the soil, and also if the weather is nice, it will just grow by itself into a beautiful tree and it will give you the fruit. We don't deny that.
Yeah.
But there are also seeds that, even though the quality is not good, but through careful nurturing and protection, and you put a lot of effort, attention to it, it will also grow. Maybe it's not going to grow as beautifully as the best seed given the same effort, but it will still grow. So sometimes, that's why we say, when life give you lemon, what do? You make
Mhm.
lemonade.
Yeah. Yes.
One of the examples I can give is that, for example, we don't choose a family we were born in.
Yeah.
If you were born in a family where your parents are fighting every day and the father is abusive, mother is having affairs with other men, that's not your fault, but that's what fate is giving to us, because that's not something you can use your personal effort to change. That's just a family you're given. But how you come out of that family and how live your own life and what lesson you learn from that and the way you process that childhood trauma is that nurturing that you need to do. But if you're not nurturing that well, of course, that family trauma will eventually become your own trauma. And that means that the seed is not good enough, but also we are not taking good care of it. And so eventually maybe it won't grow into a big tree. And so 50% is a seed, 50% is our free will. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the examples that I like too that was given an analogy as well. It's like a white sheet of paper that you can write on, but on the other side, there's stuff written on it already, right? So you got like
Mm,
the white sheet, but something else is happening too. So kind of the combination between the two.
correct.
But
Yeah.
so again, it also gives us hope because we can empower ourselves. We can deal with adversity to a large extent, and they take those lessons and grow from it. And I really like that message that
Yeah.
that this comes with.
And what is interesting is that a lot of people actually they all know this. It's not that people don't know this,
Yeah.
but I think one of the things, especially in my personal session, I realize that why people have challenges in nurturing that is because they know they can, but somehow there is a psychological blockage there. And
Yeah.
one of the typical psychological blockage is, but that's unfair.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. What I mean by that is like, for example, people say, yeah, I know that I can build my own life through my own effort, whatever, but that's just not fair.
Yeah.
Why do they get to born in a beautiful
Yeah.
family? Why do I have to go through this? I'm a good person as well. I didn't do anything wrong. Why do I have to go through this? Right? I don't want to go through this. So one of the things people need to overcome is their own false sense of justice in their own mind, because they feel that yes, I can make the effort to make things better, but I don't want to make the effort because it's almost like the world owes me
Mhm, mhm,
a good beginning. The old world's me, that. And so unless the world gives that back to me, I'm not going to make my own effort. It's almost like we're struggling with the universe with that. And so this is what I actually usually realize, that the people know that they have all the power they have to build a good life, but there's something in their mind that is stopping them from doing that because they feel it's unjustified. And I also think that that requires a lot of personal healing,
mhm,
in the process, right? And so for people who have those blockages, I would highly recommend that you do have a maybe monthly or even, let's say, bi-weekly counseling session with a professional,
mhm,
and to understand what is blocking us.
mhm.
Uh,
And part of the problem is the comparison, because you're comparing yourself, but everyone is an individual. We're unique in our talents, in our being, and so on. How would you compare yourself with somebody who's also unique in their own talent and so on? It's that
exactly.
we get
Yeah.
into some issues where it's like, just focus on yourself, and do
Correct.
what you can do.
Yeah. And usually, for the things we're very blessed with, we tend to take it for granted
That's true.
anyway.
Yeah.
Right? And we only look at what is not good enough, and we look at what other people have. And we think, oh, my life is shit.
Yeah.
But then if I mention, but you are blessed in this way, they don't have, and their reaction usually is, yeah, I know, but you
The
know what I
grass is
mean? Yeah.
always greener on the other side, right?
Greener.
And that's what
Yeah,
we
yeah,
think, but we don't
yeah,
see the whole picture often too.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I also want to finish up here with the Healing Kingdom. What would you say
Mm,
about that? You're the founder of the Healing Kingdom. What is it
correct. Yeah.
about?
So
What do you do? And so on.
Y-
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Healing Kingdom is actually the spiritual counseling practice
Mhm,
that I have been doing since 11 years ago. And the official website is www.thehealingkingdom.com. And through the website, people can find me and can contact me to book their personal reading session. And for people, clients in Hong Kong, which is where I reside in, they can come to the studio to have, actual sit next to me and do the session. And these days, I would say 30 to 40% of my clients are overseas. So a lot of clients contact me when they're maybe in the States, maybe in Canada, in Australia, in Europe, and they will contact me online and we will do Zoom sessions.
mhm,
And so through the sessions, it's exactly like the face-to-face session actually. So there will be camera used, and we will use both astrology and also tarot for the session for the clients. And so that's just my website for clients to find my information, get in touch with me, book a session. Also, they can also find my oracle cards, published books on my website, and that's also where they can purchase. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Mm,
Letao Wang. Just to remind everyone, you're an astrologist, a tarot specialist, the founder of the Healing Kingdom. You have a master's in counseling and applied astrology, so that's
correct. Yeah.
fascinating too. And just a Renaissance man, right? You
Yeah,
have so much knowledge.
thank
That's
you.
wonderful. And also to let everyone know, the two oracles that we mentioned here, the oracle of the mythic heroes, as well as the oracle of the celestial deities. I highly recommend all of that, and for people to contact you to check out the Healing Kingdom. And thank you so much for being here on the Rash's World.
Thank you so much, Arad, for having me. Yeah.
Thank you.